these categories in IT projects. So this is this slide. You can see it's just not applicable for IT project, but it can be applicable for any project. You can see at a very high level, you have the technical risks, external, which are not part of the project. You can also see the risks associated with project management, and finally, organization risks. To give an example, so when it comes to technical risks, requirements, when I say requirements, not necessarily business requirements, the technical requirements. Somebody says that the website has to be, the web page has to come within 1 second. And then we can always say that there is a probability if the number of users are more than 500, there is a probability that the website will take more than 1 minute, or sorry, not 1 minute, 1 second. So that is the risk. I'm not going to go through all the things, but this is going to give you one very high level view on how risk management can happen. In simple terms, this is called RBS, which is risk breakdown structure. RBS also got one more name which we use in project management terminology, which is called resource breakdown structure. Don't get bothered about both the names. Here it is risk breakdown structure. If you know, there is one more term called the work breakdown structure, which we use pretty much in scope management. That is used to really break down the requirements into smaller chunks. Here also it's very similar. As you saw here, under technology, under technical rather, you saw the requirements. In fact, requirements can also go under project management, because under project management you might also end up doing the business requirement capture. We can also see something called external, which is mostly we would not have much of control as a project manager. We would not have much of control, which is the supplier or the vendor. Regulatory typically comes from the government organizations. Government might say that suddenly it might come with some new rule or the law which says that okay, we will not be able to do this. Market conditions, as I said, recession, right? There is one of the market condition where we do not have much of control. Whether obviously none of us in this world have any control there. So just remember, this is just a tool which would help you to really understand and then analyze the risks. Let me take you through the next slide. As there is high probability that you are working in IT industry, I try to put some of the risks that typically I came across as part of IT projects. The first one is the technical environment. As you know, I'm sure all of you, I'm sure you would agree that technical environment in IT industry is going to be never stable. So a person has to really identify what are the different ways the IT environment might go down, and then how do they come back. So, so that is important. Information security in this particular time of the world, it is very important that we secure our information. When I say information security, it's just not the data, even related to the infrastructure or our passwords, everything that would really play a major role. Sometimes programming logic might produce some risks. What I mean by that is, say, if you're trying to code something, an array which would occupy, let's say, 999 variables, and then suppose obviously there is a probability or that there is a risk that tomorrow if our organization is going to more than that particular value, there is a probability that the program is going to fail. So that is important thing. And when it comes to infrastructure, also is going to pose a lot of risks to the organization. Infrastructure also brings many security risks, and then when I say infrastructure, any risk related to the data center, the ability for the infrastructure to support organization growth, all those things are going to come into picture. And the technology itself can pose this risk. What I mean by this is, suppose if you are using one technology, and then say, suppose if you are using Java today, there is no guarantee that Java is going to be available for lifelong, and then somebody might find innovative ways to induce some bugs or some viruses into Java coding. So versus that is, while this is one risk, there is also probability that suppose if for an organization all the systems are into Java, tomorrow there is going to be one more beautiful language is going to come, and then your organization may not be even ready to adapt to the new technology. So especially when I was a fresher, I used to always get this dilemma. If you take a typical organization, you will find they will have many databases, something like Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, IMSDB, and then when it comes to programming languages, COBOL, Java, C, C++, and .NET, all this. So I always wondered why an organization would look at so many languages. Why can't everybody use COBOL and then DB2? So later on I realized that I think dependence on one single language, it's going to be a real threat to the organization, because let's say tomorrow whoever is supporting COBOL or DB2, they would say that yeah, my organization is getting closed, I'm not going to do any more developments in the particular language or the database. Then organization has to really suffer. Finally, the technical architecture, there are a lot of kind of architectures. However, the purpose of the session is not to discuss the architecture, but it is going to pose a threat, because an architecture ideally should be in a position to it should be flexible enough to accommodate the newer request or the newer technical solutions. If it is not, then the architecture is going to collapse. So these are a few risks I discussed related to the IT project, and then now we know how to what is risk definition, how to do the risk management planning. I also discussed with you how the risk can be categorized. Now let's go to how to identify the risks. So this is important thing. Till now whatever we did was mainly the strategy. Now this is the action part or the execution part. So let's look at risk identification. So at the end of risk identification, typically we would come up with something called a risk register. Again, as I said earlier, risk register, this particular figure, it is mainly is going to offer you a tip. It is important that we need to create an atmosphere where all of your team member is really have the guts and the energy to come back and say these are the risks that are going to come into the project. And initially, as a project manager, you should be in a position to accept all the risks without evaluation, which is a main thing in the brainstorming, which I'm going to cover a little later. And ideally, all these ideas should belong to the team. There should not be any personal agenda, including the project manager. It is always important that we would include the right people who know the subject very well. Otherwise, we might end up in looking at the risks that are not very relevant to the organization or to the project. Okay. Now, so how do we do the risk identification? Let's look at, there are multiple ways. First one is brainstorming. So brainstorming is all about you get the people into a single room and then ask their ideas. Yes, we are doing this project. What do you believe can go wrong? And then, as I said earlier, it is important that project manager would encourage the people to share their own ideas and thoughts without passing any judgment immediately. Second one is Delphi method. This is mainly we use when we wanted to get the expert opinion. What I mean by this is, suppose suppose your organization going from as an example, say you were moving from business objects to, let's say, MicroStrategy, which is both are analytical tools or the reporting tools. So now, and then your organization never worked on the MicroStrategy. The best way for you to identify the risk with the newer technology is to identify the experts who has worked on this particular technology earlier, and then understand, yes, my organization is going to use this new technology. I would like to understand what are the risks that you had undergone and how you were able to manage them. So those are all called subject matter experts. Ideally, this is done by sending some emailers or the surveys or the polling, and then they would come back and then say, yeah, this is right thing, this is not right thing. Third thing we can or you can do is interviews. So what it means is you would go on and speak to the people directly face to face, and then give the scenario. This is the project that I am doing. I would like your inputs on what might go wrong. So SWOT analysis, this is something which I touched a little earlier. SWOT analysis, you take any scenario, you understand what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, opportunities, and then the threats from that particular activity or the project. Root cause identification, this is a very important one. Root cause analysis or identification we also use in the quality management, because in order for us to solve something, we need to really understand the root cause of that particular problem. So risk management is not an exception. So here also we can go on and use the root cause analysis. What does this mean is, suppose if I say attrition is a risk for the project or the for the delivery, then we need to understand why attrition is the risk for the project, the root cause. So when somebody says that why attrition is the risk, we might go back and say that, yeah, people are not very happy with the new technology, or people might also come back and say that they're not happy with their manager. So the next question would be why people are not happy with the new technology. They might say that new technology nobody uses other than this current organization. So I believe if I learn this technology, there is no scope for me to grow in the organization or in the outside of the organization. So if we are able to identify these root causes, maybe they are true. They are true, yes. So from the attrition to we went to the extent of really looking at whether the technology that we are trying to do for this project is right or not. So then we might go and then even look at changing the technology. So that is why the root cause identification is very important. The last one is checklist analysis. Now, however, I mean, though I said last one, there are a lot of other tools and techniques, but because of the time, I just chose some of the important things. Checklist analysis is very similar to the risk category that we had seen earlier. However, checklist analysis, again, I do have my personal checklist which goes for more than 150 different things when it comes to IT projects. What it does is it will really look at different scenarios, what can go wrong in a typical IT project, and then you can say whether this is applicable to your project or not. If you say yes, then obviously you need to go on and see why it is yes, and then what are the different ways that you can manage those risks. The next one, it is very important that the assumptions we need to do you need to do the assumptions analysis. What I mean by this is assumption is something which you believe it's true, and the only difference between risk and assumption is risk is a probability. We may not, I mean, nobody is sure whether it's going to happen or not. But assumption, for sure, when you say I'm assuming that it's going to, let's say, if India is playing with West Indies, right now, you can make a statement saying that I'm going to assume that India is going to win the second one day. The reason we believe that it's going to win because they have won all the previous matches, so we believe that it's going to happen again. Most probably it would happen. So that's the difference between the assumption and the risk. If I repeat it again, risk still carries some probability, 50-50%, but assumption is more towards the truth. You believe that it's going to happen. While we say that it is important that we need to understand the strength of assumption and also what is the impact if it is wrong. Both are important. So when I say strength of assumption, if I'm saying something that's going to happen, I need to have real backup numbers or the figures to say that why it's going to happen. And suppose we also need to understand, suppose if it doesn't happen, what is the impact that's going to cause, because that is also important. Suppose blindly if you strongly believe that something is going to happen, and then if it doesn't happen, we also need to understand what kind of impact it's going to cause. Let's look at, I mean, this is one more tip to do the effective risk identification. So it is important that you need to identify the trigger on time. What I mean by this is, suppose if you're executing a project for a period of 6 months to 12 months, suddenly 1 week you would realize that yes, still, so suppose if it is a 52 weeks project, and then suddenly on the till 16th week it all went very well. Suddenly 16th week there is a schedule slippage. What I mean by schedule slippage, you are supposed to deliver on that Monday, but you slipped by 3-4 days. So that's a trigger. That's a trigger which says that yes, project manager, there is something going wrong. You just need to really look at what is happening. So that's a trigger. Probably that week it may not be a problem. It might so happen that one of the team member would have gone for leave, sudden leave, and then it would have slipped. But that's the trigger. It might so happen that the team member absence might even lead into attrition, because the team member has been working last 16 weeks very rigorously. Would appreciate it. Suddenly that week he realizes that it's not worth for me to work in this particular project. So what I mean by trigger is we need to identify that there is something suddenly went wrong, and then the corrective step need to be taken as soon as possible. So this is a sample risk register. As I started the identify risk process, I said that the end of it you will be able to come up with something called risk register. A risk register is like any other register where you would go on and input your risk. You could use an Excel sheet to write the risk register, not necessarily that you need to use any paper and then pen kind of thing. To give an example here, you have identified a risk which says that the website that you have developed may crash during Christmas because of high traffic. What does this mean is, let's say you have an online buying, online shopping website, and then especially during Christmas, you might find that a lot of people would come and then buy the products, and then instead of accommodating, let's say 1,000 users, that time you need to accommodate suddenly 10,000 users. That's a risk to the website itself. So now you can see get additional bandwidth from the service provider when you are able to foresee the risk. So you would be prepared. You would speak to your service provider and say that during the period of Christmas, maybe from December 15th to January 1st, I would like to have additional bandwidth over 10 times to whatever I have. Then you will be able to mitigate the risk. And then the root cause, you can say that typically the website was designed only for the normal audience or the normal visitors, but the design was not designed for the extreme conditions like Christmas. You can also see this kind of thing, right? Especially if again, I'm sorry to pick up a lot of examples from cricket. Maybe I'll pick up something else. So sometime last year when there was Ayodhya verdict, and people they try to log into the website where there is a judgment, suddenly the website crashed because a lot of people suddenly started looking at the site. Maybe the website owner, he or she would have felt that there is going to be a lot of traffic, and then they would have bought the higher bandwidth, which did not happen. So